All right. Start off with approval of minutes. Can get a motion? Everybody looked at them? Anybody have any questions, any changes? Can get a motion? All right.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who's second?
June financials.
Who got seconded?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what we're going to review in the package is our year-end, draft year-end financial statements. These are probably 98% there. We're still going through some year-end, discretionary management reviews. This is pretty much. We have the commencement of field work with our external auditors on August 6th, so we'll be final June trial balance by Friday, August 23rd. So looking here on the summary page for the key highlights, we ended the year with 77.6 million in revenues versus a budget of 81.9 million. So it was revenues were under budget by about 4.3 million, and pretty much consistent with what we briefed in the previous finance committee meetings. The local funds were unfavorable to budget by about $118,000, and as you recall, that's in the local portion was the trip match contribution, which was $1,696,000. So that was kind of the biggest, one of the larger items that we had to overcome. And also unfavorable state funds around $2.8 million, and that's due to the timing of the various consultants projects that we had a more aggressive timeline in the budget contemplation, so we don't have the expense nor do we have the revenue. And then the remaining portion of it is in the federal funds, about $1.4 million, which is attributable to unfavorable 5307 flex, but it's offset by a good portion by the use of ARPA funds for the operator training wages, as well as use of funds for the cure the lifts in the maintenance department. On the operating expense side, operating expenses were favorable to budget by about $7.8 million. So going down the large components of it, labor was unfavorable to budget. It was about $970,000 on the budget of $50 million. That's basically being driven by the unfavorable headcount in operations. Where at the end of June, we had 314 full-time fixed route operators, 12 fixed route trainees, as well as we had 19 full-time microtransit operators and 6 microtransit operators in total. So we ended the year with a total full-time equivalence of 346 and a half individuals versus the budget of 313. So this is what is primarily generating the unfavorable labor variance. So the operations component, if as we look at the components, operations was unfavorable about $2.2 million on the budget of 34 million. And that was primarily 2.4 million in wages, offset slightly favorable with supervisor salaries, and it's the headcount driven. We had used, as I mentioned previously, we used ARPA funds to reimburse our operator training wages, which were about $1.77 million during the period. So you can see the large portion of the unfavorable was driven by bringing the extra operators and get us to the headcount level that we needed to support the service. So even though it was an unfavorable variance, there was a good that came out of it. We're up to where we need to be. Vehicle maintenance and facility maintenance were slightly unfavorable, combined about $300,000 on the labor line. And that was, they're pretty much close to the count earlier in the year, and that was due to a little bit higher overtime, as well as due to the incentives for new hires. So G&A was favorable, 1.5 million, so that kind of offset a good portion of the unfavorable from the operations side. And that was purely on headcount. So going further down in here, services, which is tied to the unfavorable revenue variance, services were favorable about $7.7 million versus the budget of $10.8 million. That's primarily in the professional and technical services and the planning consultancies, which was $7.6 million. This is attributed to some of the larger grant-funded projects getting a start later than being contemplated in the budget. Just put perspective, I know that it has been asked previously, since they are grant reimbursements, so if the expense occurs in fiscal 25, the revenues will also occur in fiscal 25, so the impact on the balance will be contract maintenance services are slightly unfavorable, only about $30,000, and the other large components of the variance are materials and services consumed was favorable $2.2 million, kind of following the same trend that we had for the last couple of months. And this is primarily that on the large component of that is favorable fuel rate variance is about $1.4 million. We were a little bullish on the price of gasoline and diesel when we prepared the budget fiscal 2020. Utilities favorable to budget about $223,000, and this is primarily due to working with Richmond DPU. We straightened out some gas and the water bills, so that's been squared away. Good line of communication with Richmond DPU. Very responsive. Casualties and liabilities costs. This is unfavorable, about $320,000, and what's driving this is the provision for uninsured, self-insured portions of our risk management portfolio. The provision for this year was almost $700,000 over what was prior year. As you listen to some of the safety reports, new operators, more incidences. This is offset, as I said, it was about another $700,000, but it was offset by the favorable policy premiums that we get through Versa. So we're all buttoned up for that. Purchase transportation is unfavorable by $1.1 million on a budget of $7.6 million. This is basically higher demand revenue might also be realized. Contemplated in the annual, on a monthly basis within the procurement contract. So therefore, it's it's legitimate, but this is at the rate of the contract. It's just more people are using the service.
Can I ask a question about that? I have a couple questions about that one specifically. Do we know what people are calling to use it for specifically? Is it for work? Is it for medical? Is it for, what are the people needing that extra access for? I'm just curious if we even know that, because it'd be interesting to see kind of what's driving some of those calls for those routes, et cetera. I just wanted to know if there's any information about that, anything. No, if the answer can be no, it's fine. I was curious if we have any other details.
Not sure. I do know that we have more medical rides than we work. Can only assume more medical, but I don't know for sure.
That's fine. Just curious because of the location of those services, where they live. Those are things that are important data points to know for the city, just thinking through.
Right.
Trying to get providers in areas that
Right, because $1 million for this is.
Well, and part of it can be when you expand service, when you expand pick route service,
Right.
you also expand the area for the paratransit. So it could
True.
be political services.
And thank you for that. The state funds, do we have a due date?
You know where they drop them? Maybe we can figure that out by looking at where the drop off is for that, right? Because CARE and all of those services, we know what the destination was, right?
They selected the purpose of trip as well, so we have all that
we do.
data.
So we could get.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
we can break it down to all that.
I think that makes sense for trying to incentivize a provider to locate in a particular area in the city or in one of the jurisdictions. Could be useful data for that.
Yeah, and we are about to kick off the paratransit operations analysis to determine things exactly like that. Is there a better way for us to strategize as far as deployment of the actual fleet?
And I know in the development committee earlier, Barb was asking about us providing paratransit service.
Well, I know I think that it would make sense in Chesterfield for us to change out. The county has a service and GRTC has a service, and there's no sense in having multiple services. That might as well get something that works for everybody. So.
question about on the state grants.
So a couple of things. One would be the state grant. Do you have a due date or expected due date of when those funds could be? Because I know that was something we talked about last meeting as well.
Each of them vary, but we're
Okay.
cognizant of making sure that do the work prior to the expiration.
That's fair. And that's what we talked about as well too. And the other thing was with the 5307 flex funds, with those being ARPA fund related, once those ARPA funds are spent, will that money go back to the previous level or was that going to be lowered?
The 5307,
Okay.
so they're about 17.
Oh, gotcha.
So they had a couple
Okay.
of years ago, they were around the 30.
What's going up?
Yeah, so the UZA has, I guess, back in better terms, has grown relative to the other UZAs across the country.
Okay. Got it. So that's not a problem. That's just because of changes in the last budget. Okay. Got it.
What that is, in here is, I want to make the comment about the lower than budget of 5307. We have funds that we slow letter from Petersburg, then the next step would be to go programming. So we have the program, we have the option whether to spend them for hard capital or use them for PM funds.
Okay.
So what this variance is that we were between our program, it didn't happen to go reprogram the next years for PM, so we opted not to use PM. So
Okay.
it was purely, so it's not, there's nothing external.
And with all of these, it's still to the net positive 3.3.
Yeah, so we are, like I said before, this is our draft, so we're right now around 3.4 million within the range. So what we're doing is usual in larger projects, we're looking to verify some of our accrual estimates for invoices we haven't seen yet. So sometimes a lot of subs on a vendor that it takes 30 to 60, sometimes 90 days. So I use that as that we're draft that we'll keep on continuing as we've made estimates as to what it would be, but if there's something more expensive than our estimate, there's something to change.
Okay. Thank you for that.
So going through that's the mechanics of the revenues and the expenses. So from a balance sheet perspective, as you'll see here, the telltale on the balance sheet, the key items that stand out is there's the cash position at the end of June here. We follow our sawtooth and we're usually lower at the end of the quarter. We're lower than June of last year, but last year in 2023, we had a lot of receipts of reimbursements for our purchases. Here we had 19 buses that came in throughout predominantly the buses were 12 of the 19 were received in June, so they were paid out. We had some reimbursements that are pending from the state, as you can see, that are $9.852 million receivable. That contains both state and federal receivables. So we have reduction in cash, but it's an increase in accounts receivable, as well as you can see about a $20 million increase in net property. So our assets have grown almost $30 million, primarily in the investment in capital assets, as well as the increase, as you can see, in the restricted funds for CBTA up $11 million. No concerns with anything on the balance sheet, just kind of like June was a very cash-intensive month with all the large purchases.
Without the reimbursement.
So I'll zoom in this one. This is cash basis of our cash flow. So this doesn't. So this is forecasting next months. You can see it. We're planning to get our receipts in here for these aspects here is the collection of outstanding FTA and state reimbursements. So we will probably be approaching a slimmer cash balance. This is overly conservative. The amount of receipts that are here from the state are lower than what our receivable balance is reflected. So this is very conservative, but with, the key takeaway here is that we have adequate resources. We're in a good position. I appreciate my staff being a little more conservative than they've been overly aggressive forecasting cash. So.
Is our cash distributed or received on a monthly basis, or is that just for calculation purposes of?
It's, we usually try to get one month for FTA reimbursement. Okay. The state operating grant comes right dead in the middle, about 1.6 million, and then we're also contemplating here is August receipts of the remaining municipalities' operating contributions. We really don't have receivable issues with that. We also, this is just our operating cash, and we do have eligible money that's invested. All this money here that's off the PIC is invested. So I think it's earning about 520 basis points.
How much of this general revenue of local government, most of that is CBTA?
Yes.
How much are you getting from local government outside of CBTA?
Outside of CBTA. Go about 9 million from Richmond and a couple 100,000 from Chesterfield.
And so that's spread over
13 million or so.
Spread over 12 months.
We invoice quarterly. So usually, I mean, the first quarter of the year is always a little more challenging because folks are starting a new municipal calendar year. So those are usually the longer pay period. We have received an CVTA, this is the schedule. This is the start of the new quarter. We already filed, or I sent in to CVTA the June 30th year end. We're in. News here is, highlight here is on the top. Blow it up so we can see it. Apologies. The receipt that we got at the end of July was $3 million. So, and you can see that the Treasury sweep, 520 basis points. Eligible income is about 406 basis. And July was a good month in the market. So August will probably have a little bit of unrealized loss unless it corrects itself in the next couple of weeks. But good position there.
Won't see the same interest in the several months out. We'll probably see less interest too.
Yeah. So obviously, depending upon whatever rate forecast from the Fed, there's potentially going to be a 25 or 50 basis.
It could be as much as 50.
And there might be a second cut in the fourth quarter. So, our 520 basis points, that could be going down to 4.5, 4.4. So we're fortuitous to ride that for the last year and a half.
Absolutely.
And we did, at the beginning of the quarter, I moved the first quarter draw. So we moved $6.3 million from the CBTA, the quarter of the operating capital budgetary allocation. So at the end of September, there's $44.112 million that is sitting there, and it's about 700,000 is set aside for studies, and the remaining $43.3 million is accumulating for the remaining funding of fiscal 25 as well as a portion of fiscal 26. And, everything in the middle column there, the way, the pick for the Wells Fargo account is 100,000 is the minimum. Anything above 100,000 earns the sweep interest of 520. So we have basically $44 million current interest on this money. With that, that concludes my comments, and so this is our draft for how we just sent to air. When we have our September Finance Committee meeting, we'll review July, and if there's any major changes to any in June.
Any questions?
The only question I have, and it's kind of not specifically about this, but more of the, I've been getting a lot of requests for shelters, the shelter plan. I know that's not technically in this, but it's part of what we're going to be doing. Well, just curious how that planning money in this, or is there anything involved with our current budget expectations that's going to be helping make that happen? Okay,
We have grants, we have money.
good.
Do you want to brief?
Everywhere but your area.
It's my area, is not fun. Well, we are the complicated one because there's the whole ownership and maintenance thing that's always a mess, but if there's a way to clean that up, I'd love to.
We have currently about $11 million that's earmarked for putting those in. We actually got 10 that arrived for City of Richmond yesterday. There are a total of 38 that will be going to the City of Richmond, 4 at Chesterfield, 8 in Henrico, that will all be here by no later than December.
Cool.
To expedite this, we will give an acknowledgement at the board, but we are moving forward with a contract. Basically do contract management, administration, as well as engineering to basically spend that money in the next 1 to 3 years. So there'll be a plan in place.
That sounds good.
The ones that are physically here now, we're ready to get them set up.
Some level, there's some engineering done for some of them, but the goal is to have, when that contract get executed at the end of the month, to get those in by the end of the year.
Okay. I know some,
All
be happy about
the ones
it.
that you mentioned?
30.
Wow.
50, yeah. And I just talked to
Total.
Barb, she said that there's different levels of concrete work being done in preparation. Chesterfield.
I just know that for us, we don't have sidewalks that connect. And that's my problem, is that if you're going to be investing like that, we should be investing with you.
Yes.
Fair? Yeah,
Well, we
the obvious.
don't have sidewalks to all of them, but we have sidewalks coming through the Fall Line Trail to most of them. So, we may have to do those, figure out how to cross the street, like
That's actually really,
to get to the other side.
there is a stop. That's one's at a Dollar General, the other one's at a library on Warwick, close to that, in South Side. And there is no traffic calming between it. And they will literally get off at the library, walk across the street to the Dollar General, and then on the way back, we pick them up again. And I saw the same couple. And I was like, how'd they cross the street?
Yeah. That's my only concern. We do have, most of our route, at least from Willis Road to the city line, we're supposed to have the Fall Line Trail starting pretty much in next year. So, it'll pick up, not quite, but about half of the route. And then there's other parts that have sidewalks already and some parts that don't. So we're trying to figure that out. But from Willis Road to Galena, which is the rest of the way down Route 1 that will get it, that's supposed to go in 28. Then we'll have everything on Route 1 done and everything from Petersburg done to Route 10, but then we have the hard part, which is Chester Road. That's going to be it. There's a swamp on one side and a cliff on the other, an embankment on the other. So that's going to be the fun piece, connecting them together.
Fun. That's the word we're using? Okay. Yeah. That'll be the fun.
Any other old business?
Also, just for information, a consent agenda item regarding the GRTC and RideFinders corporate bank resolutions is just adding a new controller to GRTC bank accounts and LGIP, as well as we're adding interim director of RideFinders, interim executive director of RideFinders accounts. So that's on consent. We hired the controller in April. Yes, the probation period. Exit, so we'll have an opportunity, one of the RideFinders folks on the bank account as well. And then the other item that we were going to discuss here was a couple finance committees ago, there was a discussion here with
Bonding.
finance committee about bonding. So the management team, we met with bond counsel through Williams Mullen, and they researched the question, can GRTC issue revenue bonds? So based upon the work that was performed by bond counsel, it was determined that from both the Commonwealth of Virginia as well as the federal. GRTC does have the appropriate validation process that they outline. We do have the authority to issue tax exempt revenue bonds. Their review of both the Commonwealth of Virginia and federal Internal Revenue Code statutes.
Does that get backed by CVTA dollars or?
It would be pledging the distribution, most likely solely the sales and use tax component of the CVTA, 15% distribution.
Okay.
So in addition, through discussion with bond counsel, GRTC would need to retain the services of financial advisors. So we also, CVTA went through a public procurement and hired PFM. That contract that was executed with PFM is available to other political subdivisions. So we could utilize that contract to engage with PFM based upon the pricing that PFM gave, basically the rate card per deal card based on sizing, through an issuance and closing of a revenue bond sale, not exceed $75,000. So what we put together here is the recommendation from the Finance Committee to the GRTC board that basically the Finance Committee wants management to continue to pursue the processes outlined by our bond counsel to obtain the requisite approval and initiate a bond validation proceeding for the creation of a GRTC revenue bond program. In addition, the Finance Committee recommends the GRTC Board of Directors that the GRTC management engage PFM to act as financial advisor on behalf of GRTC to assist in the establishment of the GRTC revenue bond exceed $75,000. Based upon what we have found, and I have nauseam of details. Cheryl doesn't want us to go through, but it kind of lays out the various validation process, which we go through later at the board. Have the Finance Committee recommend to the big board for us to continue and is also engaged with PFM.
Any questions or discussion?
Motion.
And so moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, I'll sign it.
Lincoln.
Lincoln seconded it. Unanimous.
Keep mine up.
Any other business? Any
Was
questions?
timing all right on time? No, I apologize for being late at call it an emerging issue. That's mostly Andreas' fault.
Yeah. My name is Andreas. There's a fault named after me in California.
But I had a great catch up with Adrian. Was that yesterday or earlier this week? I don't know. So I can't.
Yeah, it was yesterday.
Yeah. About, next steps on, planning for the transfer center. And I do believe that getting the answers on this bonding and what's possible can be done can get us a long way to knowing what's possible. So excited for that.
Any other business?
Delay.
All right, we're adjourned.
Second delay.
Did Dan tell you he wasn't coming?